Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Raptor Queens Podcast, the first all-women podcast covering the Toronto Raptors. My name is Sarah Khalil. I'm here with my other Queens of the North, Esty Magic and Sonali Sharma. We are going to be covering what is currently one of the hottest topics in the league right now, which is the debate that the players are having, this divide or split, or at least conversation that's being initiated by the players about whether or not we should even return to play. And this is partially because of COVID and player safety, but mostly right now, this is a conversation about racial justice. And so that is definitely something we're going to cover. Before we get to that, we are going to stick to our regular sort of structure where we begin by covering Raptors specific topics. So we want to take a look at this bubble. We want to consider how the Raptors benefit from this bubble and how they might be at a disadvantage, and kind of just take a Raptors perspective on the bubble setup. So that's part of our conversation today. And of course, we have our regular tea time. One of our players from last season just recently got engaged, so we're going to let you all know who that is. And also body transformations everywhere. Oh my goodness, players losing weight, shedding pounds, and we are going to cover that and give our thoughts on that as well. So let's get right into it, and we will start with this conversation about the bubble and the Raptors. So, Sonali, I think I'm going to start with you, but the idea behind the question is really, okay, we know that all the players are going to be in the same situation. They're all going to be in Orlando. They're going to be in these hotel rooms, and to the extent that anything is decided, it seems like guests are going to be limited until the end of the first round, and there's 8 games or a certain number of games per team. So there's a lot that is the same for all of these teams to make it as even as possible. But inside of that structure, what do you think is advantageous for the Raptors versus maybe disadvantageous? That's not how you say that. But you know what I mean. What do you think is the advantages versus disadvantages for the Raptors? Go ahead, Sonali.
Yes. In terms of advantages, so we've been covering this a lot around Nick Nurse and sort of creativity in plays, and even just with the season that we've had with all of the injuries. I just think that if anybody can survive in a bubble, it's almost like the Raptors have been gearing up for this moment, because creativity is what we do. If we think about, hey, we did the box and one defense against Steph Curry, we can do anything, right? COVID or no COVID. And so I definitely think that creativity of our coach is a huge advantage in a situation such as this. Now, I'm not sure if I'm convinced about this, but I definitely have heard some people talk about, home court advantage and that sort of thing, and how that doesn't really apply to the Raptors, and maybe the Raptors it doesn't seem to matter or affect their performance the way maybe it does some other teams. I think just by watching the social media and seeing the players, it sounds like the core team members have really done a good job of keeping in touch with each other. So in terms of team sort of chemistry, I think we have an advantage there as well too. Everyone's maybe had a lot of time to heal, and I know we're going to talk about Marc Gasol and his youth process, his Benjamin buttoning that he's been doing in the last couple of weeks or months.
That's a great description.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely an advantage, and hopefully our players have had time to heal from their injuries. But in terms of disadvantages, I guess one of the things is for me, it depends on what people's thresholds are, but Florida itself has had, I think it's one of the 20 states in the US that's had a rise in the number of COVID cases. And I think over the weekend, last I heard was on Sunday, they had around just over almost 75, I think just over 75,000 people with cases. So I don't know, that psychology is there, the malaise from the pandemic. So I don't know how that's going to affect the Raptors. we've been off since March 11th. I am a little bit worried about no competitive playing, but I think that goes for any team. It's not just the Raptors. And then also the weather. The weather is something practically that I've been thinking about. Is it going to be too hot in Florida compared to Toronto? So there's that. And then just, again, another psychological element, which is obviously we'll be talking about this in the around the league session is the and the social injustices in the world and the Black Lives Matter movement. So yeah, so that's sort of, I guess, my thought.
The home court advantage one is kind of interesting because obviously all teams are going to be left without home court advantage or away advantage, or I don't know, maybe the league will come up with some way to simulate or emulate a home court feeling. But I do know that Nick Nurse specifically said, away game, home game, fans, no fans, we don't care, we're here to play, which is so typical of Nick Nurse. So I do think there's something about the advantage, or not necessarily advantage, but the coaching mindset of the organization that could factor in nicely for the Raptors here. Essie, what are your thoughts?
So in terms of advantage for the Raptors, I would say that I think they are at an advantage with the new format, just because they have so many plug and play players who are, I can't believe I got through that. It was kind of a tongue twister. They have so many plug and play players who just know the system. And I believe it was JJ Redick who made some sort of quote some time ago where he said he was so impressed with the Raptors defense because it was like they all were so in a zone and were like 2 steps ahead and everyone knew what they were doing. And I feel like that's going to be an advantage for the Raptors versus teams who, like, there's some teams that they only really got their stride as we were getting closer to the playoffs. Like, took a while to have proper chemistry, learn their coach's system. So I feel like in that regard, this is actually an advantage because I feel like the Raptors will be one of the best teams at just kind of hop, skip, getting to it, and getting ready to go, versus some of the other teams who might have lost their momentum that they were building as they were getting closer to the playoffs. So in that sense, I think it's an advantage. And also the Raptors play pretty well on the road as well. And sometimes, even like Kyle Lowry plays better on the road. So I feel like not having home court advantage is not going to be a big hinder for us. I think obviously it's nice. You have, the fans and that energy, but I think not like players who tend to use the fans' energy as motivation, it's going to hurt them. Whereas I feel like the Raptors don't really need it. Like, they can thrive off the energy, but they don't necessarily need that energy every time, as we saw with them in the playoffs last year, where they were able to go to Milwaukee and steal the road that game 5. And even with at Oracle, they were able to get all the road games there. So I actually think it's an advantage for the Raptors. I think that it'll help them take advantage of, other teams not being ready to go into this. So yeah, I actually don't see very many disadvantage at all for the Raptors.
Interesting. When you said that thing about the plug and play, it reminded me that there have been some games this season that I've watched where the concept of well-oiled machine really made sense to me when watching the Raptors, because the way they were able to execute their defense and execute their offense is seamless. Everyone knows where they're supposed to be and at what point. And I kind of have forgotten about that until being reminded right now. And I think that's a really good point. Like, just the simple fact that the Raptors know what to do. And in fact, they know it so well that Nick is specifically able to throw in creative defensive plays because the foundation is so set that they can mess around with different kinds of defenses throughout a game and adjust without really needing to think about it. That's a really good point, Essie.
Yeah. I agree with what you just said.
Cool.
Okay, cool.
Cool. All right. Well, Sonali, just to ride off what you said earlier too about team chemistry, and I 100% gotta. I was having this conversation with my dad, and this is where this came from. But he said, you know, when you have all these players in hotel rooms and they can't leave and their families don't get to be there, and the only people they get to hang out with are basically themselves, you're gonna find out which teams have drama. Like, guaranteed. We're gonna learn how these players really feel about each other. Things are gonna just pop up. And in that respect, I do feel like this is another advantage Raptors. I'm sure that they have internal things like, I don't know, how could you, I don't know if you can completely get along with your entire team at all times, but they seem to have some way of working with each other and dealing with whatever needs to be dealt with in terms of, you know, their interpersonal relations that really works and leads to a drama-free zone in their locker room. So I'll be really curious to find out where drama does exist, either with the Raptors or with other players. But I don't think we're going to find out a ton about the Raptors.
I think I agree with you on that one. I think we're not a very like a dramatic team. We're champions and we have a champion attitude. So that's what's going to come out. But I don't know why when you were talking about players being in the rooms, I was thinking about the Michael Jordan documentary and the pizza delivery. And for some reason, it just, I don't know, just spelled disaster for me. I mean, all these players all in. Yeah. And also, like, who gets to choose, like, which hotel do they stay in? And yeah, I don't know. Anyways.
Well, that's going to probably be disadvantage Raptors because we all know that the league hates Canada. And so they'll be like, how do we disadvantage the Raptors? I'm just kidding. This is a joke. But I could imagine a scenario where other teams were getting priority or precedence over some things because, you know, Essie, they're from LA.
So the Raptors end up in a motel while the other teams end up in a hotel? Is that what you're insinuating?
I mean, like, you can picture it, right? Like, it's funny because that could happen.
It's so funny. It's like, who on the team is most likely to, you know, get annoyed with somebody really quickly? You know what I mean? I feel like Kyle Lowry is the type who's going to be like, go to bed or something. You know what I mean? When other people, because they're going to have to hang out with each other a lot, like you mentioned, like, because they can't go out and do their recreational activities. So exactly. they're gonna have no choice to hang out with each other a lot. So yeah, that'll be interesting. But you know what though, the Raptors are not the type of team that like we find out their drama anyway. So even if there are certain players who don't like each other or some who get on each other's nerves, it's like we would never know.
Yeah, exactly. So we could be totally wrong that there's an advantage to the Raptors here because we just have no idea what's going on and they're just exceptionally good at keeping things quiet. But yeah. I kind of don't think so. It doesn't really work with the way they play together.
And even if they have drama behind the scenes, they don't seem to let it affect them on the court. So
yeah. And what do you think, Essie? Like you've lived in Toronto and now you're in LA. Do you think that playing in Florida heat after occasionally traveling around to hot places, but mostly living in Toronto, do you think that's going to be a disadvantage for the Raptors?
No.
It's going to be air conditioned.
I think they're going to love it. They're going to be like, this is great.
Okay. So disadvantage Toronto because all players are going to want to leave Toronto. That's what you're saying.
Sorry to, you know, bring up the typical stereotype or whatever. I think I even remember last year when in the Golden State series, I don't know who said it or who's on a podcast or like every time they would cut to Oracle, they'd be like, here in sunny Oakland, like the introduction. It's like they made it so obvious that we're going from dreary Toronto to, you know, the sunshine in the Bay Area, you know, so.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah. This is definitely a bias for good weather.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess this last bit, the last thought I had, and I'm not sure how relevant this will be. I suspect it's going to be really specific to each individual player, but their own sense of maybe relative safety in quarantine, with Florida having closer to 75,000 cases and like all of Canada has 99,000 active cases. So part of me wonders if players would think to themselves, oh, I'm going over to a particular region of the world that's really active compared to where I am right now, and if that would have an impact. But I think that's going to be really individual to each player. And also, I mean, that's kind of on the NBA to actually create a bubble that's safe for players.
Well, I feel like players like Serge Ibaka, who like, you know how it took Serge Ibaka forever to leave Toronto? I think he finally just left the other day. He was like the one player who was sticking to like staying in his apartment, like hardcore.
Somehow that makes so much sense to me that it would be him, but go ahead.
Yeah, so if anything, he would be the one that might be hesitant, I feel like. But with everyone else, I mean, so many of them have been in the States anyway, so for us over here, it's like, welcome to the jungle.
Yeah, so that's okay, fair enough, you're right. So most of the other players they're not all in Toronto, that's what you're saying. So
yeah, and at least
really.
they're in a bubble. I mean, I wish I could be in a bubble. I'm just in the wild with COVID-19 everywhere.
That's fair, legitimate. All right, cool. Well, are there any other final comments about advantages or disadvantages for the Raptors bubble, or are we ready to move on to some bubble tea?
So today's tea time is going to focus on the players that maybe haven't been drinking a lot of bubble tea. So what has COVID done to the players' bodies? In particular, Marc Gasol and Kyle Lowry. I mean, we've all been well acquainted with Serge Ibaka's discipline and self-motivation. And, he's been sort of leading the pack in terms of his workouts and just staying sane during this pandemic. But in the last couple of days, we've seen this very famous photo, or two photos, one of Kyle Lowry in Philadelphia during one of the protests there, and one of Marc Gasol, where Marc Gasol looks like he's legitimately 8 years younger and about 100 pounds lighter. And so I'm really curious to know what you ladies think about him, because on this podcast, Marc Gasol has been sort of he's been a contentious player and a contentious issue between the two of you. So I'm really curious.
What you mean is everyone has been on the Serge train, and every so often I've been like, hey, Marc's also a great player. That's what you're saying.
I mean, sure.
No, that's cool. Essie, why don't you go first? I feel like you probably have some thoughts and opinions, as do I.
So for all you listeners at home, there's a reason why Sarah's asking me to go first, and that's because I said that Marc Gasol was most likely to not show up to camp in shape. And I said this, I don't know, was it a month ago now? And so she wants me to admit that I was wrong, but I won't, because I don't think I was wrong. And let me tell you exactly why. Because one photo does not mean anything. It doesn't mean that he's in game shape. It doesn't mean that his cardio is good. We don't even know if he lost the weight healthily, because people can sometimes just lose weight by forgetting to eat. If we look at the quarantine, even myself, since I've been working at home most of the time now, I've been forgetting to eat. Like, it'll be 5 o'clock and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I didn't have lunch. So I think people being at home a lot, it has changed their eating habits. We don't know if he lost muscle mass. We don't know if he lost weight the right way for his gameplay. So I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon of this, oh, look at Marc, he's lost all this weight, he's going to be so ready, because we don't know, because we haven't been given enough details about his training regimen. So the picture doesn't mean anything to me. Sorry.
Interesting. Wow. For those of you out there, you should know that Essie is a world-class debater. So this is... I can see the strength there. But before I go to Sarah, I mean, there have been a lot of tweets out there. Particularly, my favorite tweet was how people have been commenting on Marc Gasol and how he has gotten himself into shape because he's about to retire Joel Embiid mid-game. So it could be that Joel Embiid has been, on his mind, and it's been his motivation factor. But maybe he's intermittent fasting, who knows? But I'm curious to see what Sarah has to say about this.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so first of all, I feel like you just have a perpetual bias against Marc Gasol, and you were just like, I have to find a way why he's still not better than Serge. Maybe it's more appropriate to say that you're pro Serge and you want to make sure it stays that way. I don't know if that's accurate, but I got two things to say. First of all, I think Marc heard you. I think Marc was like, man, everyone keeps comparing me to Serge, but the one area where they never compare me to Serge is in my looks. And everyone calls Serge a model, but no one even comes close to calling me a model. So then Marc was like, I gotta get hot. And then Marc got hot, and now they're both hot. So that's that's one thing I think that he was like, I'm gonna compete with Serge on all fronts so that I don't lose my starting gig, because he recognizes and respects that Serge is actually absolutely fantastic and has completely stepped up while Marc's been injured. So that's one thing. Second thing that I've wondered about is that Marc is not the only player that has lost a lot of weight. So we got Kyle. Looks like he slimmed down and kind of bulked up a little bit as well. Like his definitely appears to be more muscly. And then there are players on other teams that have also lost weight. Nikola Jokic, I don't know how to say his last name. Jokic? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jokic.
Thanks. Anyway, he has also lost a significant amount of weight. And I kind of wonder if this might be part of just generally a team strategy. Like we only have X amount of months, like 2.5 months of playtime, 3 months of playtime. Instead of a 10-month season, we're in like a short season. And again, I was talking to my dad about this. When I don't talk to you guys about basketball, I talk to my dad about it. But anyway, just this idea that the remainder of the season is a sprint, not a marathon. And so is it actually beneficial for players that are traditionally a bit heavier to just come back with all that weight shed? And I'm wondering if it's just part of a team strategy to have Marc lose all that weight. So that's not necessarily to say he lost weight healthily. I'm not sure, Essie, you could actually be right. But I'm curious if this is actually part of the gameplay given the shortened season.
Well, if you look at like the players who have lost weight, or the notable ones, like Joker and Joel Embiid has also lost a lot of weight. They're all ones that were considered out of shape before. So, so I know we didn't necessarily consider Marc out of shape before, but maybe he did. I don't know. But the other two were more notably like getting criticized all the time for being, overweight. Or actually, you can add James Harden to that list because he slimmed down a lot too. But
totally.
See, with James Harden, I know specifically he's been working out. Like he's talked about, or some report came out that he had a whole training regimen this whole quarantine, and same with the Joel Embiid as well, because Joel Embiid's on a mission to prove everyone wrong, and he doesn't want to get traded because it's like Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid who we keep or whatever, that whole thing. So those ones we know of, but Marc Gasol, there just really isn't any explanation at all until he tells us. You know what I mean? And then I'm also worried about his shooting because it always takes him some time to, it does. And Ollie's laughing, but it always takes him some time to get back his shot. And they haven't been shooting for so long. I mean, unless he has a court in his house that we don't know about. I think he was in Spain, or he is in Spain. I'm not 100% sure. So it's like, even just shooting, even if he's lost weight, is his shooting going to be okay? Like, is he going to be ready to actually score some baskets? I mean, maybe the losing weight will help him be able to jump better. I don't know, because I know he wasn't the greatest at jumping that high. So I feel like, okay, that's one way it can help, just because he's simply lighter.
Thank you for admitting that, Essie.
That's it.
It was such a backwards compliment or whatever. What's it when they say it's a thing? What's it?
Backhanded compliment?
Yeah, backhanded compliment.
You're negging Marc Gasol. Oh boy.
I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast.
Me too. But that's interesting what you say about team strategy. Sarah, because like James Harden and Russell Westbrook. So Russell Westbrook had like these really famous like workout videos that he had like Kevin Hart working out with him, and he's like put on a lot of muscle as well too during this time. And Ben Simmons has been working out super hard. So I think those folks are they're on a mission. But
yeah, definitely.
So that makes a lot of sense. But on the topic of people being the players being really fit, there's also most notably little Luka. Luka has put on quite a bit of weight during this time.
Didn't his trainer come out and say that he's not in the best shape right now or something like that?
Yeah, and I've seen some Instagram posts. Not so great. Oh, but the cutest one, I don't know if you guys saw, but like Giannis also joined this train, but he wants to also show that he's like number one dad, and he's been doing workouts where there's a TikTok video that came out this weekend where he was doing push-ups and kissing his little son Liam every time he would do a push-up.
Aww. He's gonna be ready. He's gonna be ready for sure. LeBron's gonna be ready.
Oh yeah, LeBron has those crazy like core, those flippity floppity thingy workouts ropes that he's been doing. That's what they're called. Yeah,
LeBron has literally been like, it's like he wants everyone to know that he's ready. He wants to intimidate his opponents. Like he posts so many trading videos.
And it's like I feel like for LeBron, like a championship this year is like the biggest championship that he could ever get in his lifetime.
He needs to win. Like I just feel like he needs to win. Like if the Raptors don't win the championship, I want LeBron to get it so badly. Like I just think it would just make such a fairy tale ending for LeBron James to get another ring right now after all the adversity. I just think it would be so good for his legacy. Sorry to have gone on a LeBron James.
I'm sure you're not the only Raptors fan that thinks so. There's one of my colleagues at work often says he's a huge Raptors fan. He's like, if it's Raptors versus LeBron this year, part of me is not going to know who to cheer for because he really wants to see LeBron's legacy be cemented and enough of the bad talk about LeBron. So
yeah, I just want, like, no matter what, I want the Raptors to win. But if they're not going to win, 100% want LeBron to win. 100%. Plus, I don't want the Clippers to win.
I know. That's like, I'm like, is it because you want LeBron to win or is it because you don't want the Clippers to win?
It's both. A little bit of both.
That's really fun. Speaking of rings, so we have a little bit of happy news in the NBA player world. So it looks like Danny Green finally proposed to the love of his life of 5 years now. And so there's been a really cute little Instagram post he posted the other day. I think, was it today or yesterday? And the other sort of good news is that Terrence David II was also buzzing on Twitter and Instagram with a cute post with his son who just turned 1. And I don't know how to pronounce his son's name. I think it starts with an H, but cute stuff out there during these times. But yeah, that's all I got to say. But I did have like this punny thing that I wanted to say about Joker, where I was going to say like the Denver Nugget finally traded his nuggets for abs.
I see, you don't have to laugh at that.
No, it
was so bad.
Did you not get the joke?
I got to. I just me and puns. I have like a blanket rule that I won't laugh at puns.
I just wanted to hear Essie's laugh, okay?
It's funny because I always have a delayed moment where it takes me a while to realize what you were saying. So, but I got it.
Excellent.
All right. Thanks, Sonali. That was cute. And congratulations, Danny Green. Happy for you. All right. So we will now move in to some of the conversations that the players are having about the return to play. So a few days ago, yes, 3 or 4 days ago, Shams, one of the correspondents, one of the guys who's got leads on all the things, Shams, he posted on Twitter that Kyrie Irving, who is one of the vice presidents of the NBA Players Association, said he led a call of 80 NBA players, including Chris Paul, Kevin Durant, Carmelo Anthony, Donovan Mitchell. And a lot of these players spoke up against basically saying that they didn't want to resume the season due to nationwide unrest from social injustice and racism. So this stirred up a bit of a conversation, various players speaking kind of either agreeing with this or not agreeing with it. For example, Dwight Howard said that, this might not be the time. This might not be the time to resume the season. And would it make more sense? Is the cause of racial justice better served by not resuming the season? Is basketball distraction? So that was one point of view from Dwight Howard. Austin Rivers came out and he had a different point of view, essentially saying, yeah, I know this is what's happening, but there's a lot of good that basketball can do. And money in players' pockets is good for players supporting causes that matter to them. And also, this is good for fans and children growing up to have something to watch, to have something to do other than be in the streets. So that's something that Austin Rivers stated. And, there was also some, I guess we can call it backlash. For example, Kendrick Perkins had this to say about Kyrie's comments. He said, well, what changed over the last 9 or 10 days? What changed was, and I strongly believe in what I heard, is that the NBA and the Players Association told Kyrie that he couldn't go to Orlando. And so that's why Kyrie's speaking up. So that's another thing that's been reported. And just today, the most recent news on the matter is that Kyrie and another player who I can't remember right now, basically they started an NBA player coalition. That's what's being called. And they delivered a statement to ESPN and basically said, as an oppressed community, we are going on 500 plus years of being systemically targeted, used for our IP and talent, and also still being killed by the very people that are supposed to, quote unquote, protect and serve us. We've had enough. We are combating the issues that matter most. We will not accept the racial injustices that continue to be ignored in our communities. We will not be kept in the dark when it comes to our health and well-being, and we will not ignore the financial motivations and expectations that have prevented us historically from making sound decisions. The other player was Avery Bradley, who's the LA Lakers guard. So this is kind of what is unfolding. It is a developing story. This conversation is clearly very important to many players, and that's what's going on. So, Essie, we'll start with you. What do you make of these conversations and the back and forth and the statements? Do you think that this is going to mean the league won't resume? What do you make of it?
So at the very beginning, so before we got as many details as we have now, we had initially heard that Kyrie Irving was leading the charge. And like most NBA fans, I definitely have a bit of a bias against Kyrie Irving. So when I heard it was him, I was like, is this because he thinks the earth is flat and having all the NBA players on one side of the earth might cause it to tip over and they all fall off the edge of the earth or something like that? Okay, no, I'll be serious for a second. So that's not what I actually really thought. So in all seriousness, this is actually one of the few times that I agree with Kyrie Irving. And as much as I wanted the NBA to come back, and there was a part of me that was just like, oh man, because I miss the NBA, just like everyone else. You know, we all miss the NBA. We want to see them play, but it's like, if you really think about an opportunity to leverage something of power, this is it. You know what I mean? And I feel like this is going to be, if they decide not to do it, because keep in mind, there's a lot, if they were to, for some reason, not play, there will be massive repercussions. So that's going to make, global news. Everyone's going to be talking about it. It'll probably be one of the first times in history you've seen so many players take a stand, particularly NBA players, because they don't really do massive disruptive things. Like, they're not so much like the NFL, where so many players started taking the knee when Colin Kaepernick did, and all that. The NBA, they're not really they just, wear t-shirts and stuff. Not to diminish what they've done, but I'm just being realistic, historically speaking. So yeah, this is a big, big deal, because if for some reason they didn't resume the season because the players, or too many players, decided to sit out, that would end up voiding the collective bargaining agreement, or it gives them the right to void it. And that's massive repercussions for player salary, would potentially cause the whole of next year as well. In addition to this year being canceled, whole of next year going into a lockout, because they won't be able to agree to new terms, because all the salaries will come down, because why would the NBA want to invest a lot of money with so much economic uncertainty? So there's just such a domino effect. Any players who are free agents right now, they're not going to get anything close to what they want, and that was already in question already. So there's a lot of repercussions that would happen. So it's definitely a decision that can't be taken lightly, but it would be very impactful if it happened. It would force, governors and big corporations who all sponsor the NBA to really get involved in this, and take a stand. So he's right that this is, not only is it an opportunity to show that, like he said, they won't accept it anymore, but also that, and also that it will be a giant distraction from, all of the causes that everyone's been fighting for right now. Because think about how sports work in general. It's already a distraction from all of life's troubles. We all watch sports to get away from, life's problems, or depression, or anxiety, or just, you're tired or spent from work, you're not going to watch the game and have a beer or whichever. So in that sense, it's already a distraction from just regular everyday life. Can you imagine at a time right now when everybody is so stressed about the virus, the economy is in such downturn, people are dying, people are in poor mental health. So even more, everyone's just going to go right into talking about basketball, what player did what. They're just going to forget that, we have this big cause going on, and that the protests are still happening, or who knows, maybe less people will be protesting now. So it's definitely something that, if we do want to see real reform and change, we can't be creating distractions that take away from the cause and have it end up like everything else, where in however short amount of time we've just gone back to our normal life. So I do agree with him, and I still don't want it to cancel or I don't want them to have a reason to cancel, or I don't want it to be a situation where there's like just not enough players or something. But I do 100% understand where he and Dwight Howard are coming from. Yeah, so that's my serious answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, so I saw Danny Green comment on this too, and for him, he's on the other side, and he thinks that it's possible to play, and I think he said, yeah, it's possible to play, and that in his opinion it was more powerful to play while protesting, because they could use like a media as the platform, because we've been seeing all of this stuff on social media around amplifying voices, amplifying yeah. So I don't know, like, I've been giving that a bit more thought, and I definitely agree with you, Essie. I think also just thinking about the National Basketball Players Association and Chris Paul, I mean, he's facing a really difficult decision, I think, in terms of how he's going to unite the 450 players that play basketball and how they're going to move through this. Because, we've got like you said, we've got the bubble pod issue with the pandemic, but then we have this massive social justice movement, which our world has literally stopped as a result of. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think this is the end of this story. And yeah, even though Kyrie Irving, I agree, he's the guy who thought the earth was flat. But I think he's right on this one. And yeah, I don't know. But I mean, the King James, the last I heard, he seems to think that the show must go on and the game must be played. And the economic sort of devastation caused by not going forward with this, I think is that impact is real. I think the last time I saw the price tag, it was like they would lose $645 million if they didn't proceed with this season. And yeah, I just don't know how this is going to play out. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, to me, it reflects a couple of things, or I can draw a couple of conclusions from it. One, there clearly isn't a unified buy-in from players that resuming the season is the thing to do. And I already think that there was probably some hesitancy from players just about resuming the season straight up for health reasons. But my impression is, to the extent that players had that concern, it didn't seem like it was like there either weren't enough players that were worried about it, or it didn't have the same kind of clout. Like it was, or at least the NBA thought it could be managed. They thought the risk could be managed. But here we have, I actually don't think the players are split on racial justice issues. I don't think that's where there's any split. It's just a split as to whether resuming the season is something that can be done in such a way that supports the cause, or if that resuming at all is actually works against the cause. And I do think both perspectives are valid. Essie, I think you make some really, really good points about just how powerful of a statement it would be to simply not resume the season. And this is definitely the year where things that you didn't imagine could happen are happening. So I can definitely imagine a scenario where the NBA does not return. I can also imagine a scenario where the NBA doesn't return and Adam Silver backs that decision. Like, I don't even think this would be necessarily a Players Association versus NBA battle. There would be ramifications to everyone involved, everyone. But I can imagine a scenario where basically the NBA says, this is what our players want, and we get behind them on this. Yeah. So I think about
add to before we leave Sonali's point though about the players rather using it as a vehicle to, like, if they do play, using it as a vehicle to draw attention to the movement. The only reason why I don't really think that's going to do anything is because I just think that, like, okay, so they might all kneel on the first game or whichever, or you know what I mean? Or they might wear certain clothing. But I don't think that that's going to do anything. Unless, I don't mean to just dismiss that like it doesn't mean anything, because it does from a symbolic standpoint, but from an action standpoint, I just don't think. I mean, we've seen players wear I Can't Breathe shirts before. I just don't think it's going to do anything if they do that. They're going to have to actually really do some sort of action to help the movement. So, and this is not to say that I'm against this season coming back, because I don't want to give people that impression either. I'm just saying that if that's what happens, I support it. But to be honest, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the NBA will put way too much ramifications on this and force their hand. and however many players they have, even if they got to bring in two-way players or the G League players or whoever, they're going to make it happen, because the revenue loss is just way too much. It's just way too much if they don't finish. They're already at a loss this season because they haven't had as many games. It's not a full 82 game season, and they've lost broadcasting. They haven't fulfilled their broadcasting contracts, and then also having no fans, and next season there'll likely be no fans again. So I don't think they're going to let it slide. I think they're going to, whoever's on board, if LeBron's on board, I think that's all they care about, to be honest. It's kind of like Patrick Beverley's comment where he said, I think I actually have it here.
I think he said, Hoopers say what y'all want.
If King James said he's hooping, we all hooping, not personal, only business. So yeah, I just think that'll, it might not be the type of teams we want to see. Like, we might not have all the players we want, but I think it will happen. I think what I'm more surprised about too is, like, well, not surprised, but rather it really opens my eyes to the magnitude of how much everything shifted with the death of George Floyd. Because just like a week before, all the Raptors players were saying they're ready to go, they're training, they can't wait to come back, you know what I mean? And then, if you look on Fred VanVleet's Twitter, he's been liking posts that sound like we should cancel it. So it's like, it just goes to show how big of a deal this is, and rightfully so, it should be. But I think seeing the impact of it is still eye-opening every single day, because we're seeing it manifest in so many different ways, even in sports. So it's just really interesting.
Absolutely. And I think, and then combined, Essie, with the fact that what's his name, Steven Jackson, and his sort of statements around just, he was friends with George Floyd, and how being a former basketball player and being an influential voice in basketball, I think it's very personal from sort of my lens. And I agree with you, like, there's no position. You put it so beautifully by saying, it's not that we don't want the season to go on, but we are alive to this impact that this has created and it's touching all of our lives, not, every single person that I know. And that's bigger than us. That's bigger than the game of basketball. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, and Steven Jackson's statement was very interesting too, because I actually forgot about that. So thanks for bringing that up, because he has had that sort of balance of being a basketball player while also fighting this movement right now. So, or I shouldn't say fighting this movement, I mean the opposite, sorry, leading this movement right now. So yeah, it was definitely really interesting to hear his statement. I think where things get a little murky, though, if I'm being honest, is some people just attribute it to Kyrie having a bigger salary, that he has the flexibility. Because like Austin Rivers, I believe he was only on what does he make, 2 years, $2 million right now? Because I believe he's still on his rookie contract. I'm not 100% sure. But it's like, if you're a player who's only making $2 million a year compared to Kyrie, who makes $30 million a year, it's like, of course you can afford to, be like, oh, I would give up my everything. And we don't know 100% if that statement was correct. It was just reported from that call, but where he said he would give up everything or something like that right now. So I think that's also skewing some players' opinions who want to play, because they're like, wait a minute, you're one to talk when you make so much money. You know what I mean? What about the rest of us who, need the money to come back? And it's possible, because even though players make $1 million, or I think the lowest salary is about $800K, probably a two-way type of player, a lot of athletes actually live paycheck to paycheck, because they end up having such high expenses in the end. So yeah, so it's kind of hard to take, like, when you take everything into consideration, it's kind of hard to, like, I'm usually don't sit on the fence with stuff, and I always tell you guys don't sit on the fence, but I'm on the fence with this one, admittedly.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, did you see that other quote that I forget who quoted it, but I think Kyrie said he actually touched on that, and he said there's only 20 guys that are getting paid, and I'm part of that. Let's not pretend there's not a tiered system purposely here to divide us all. So, which is very confusing in itself.
Yeah, like that makes the argument worse. It's like, well, thanks for reminding us that you are not part of the majority and that you're barely going to be affected by this financially. So I do remember that statement actually, and it was a little bit weird because I was like, I get what he was trying to say. He was trying to say that the system is also causing some players to not make enough money. I get what he was trying to say, but it just came out wrong. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Well, in that case, I guess we'll see if the league resumes, and I kind of feel like we'll know when it actually starts. Like that's when we'll know if it's going to happen. The tip off will be our clue. Still lots to figure out, and that's what's going on. But yeah, as things progress and as we learn more, we will definitely keep you informed. So be sure to tune into our podcast next week. If you got friends who are wondering what's happening and just missing the Raptors, make sure you tell them about our podcast at Raptor Queens on Twitter, Buzzsprout, Apple, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram, and iHeartRadio. Okay, everyone, thanks a lot for tuning in, and stay Raptors fans. Talk to y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.